Monday once again. Welcome to News Talk on SantaCruzVoice.com. I'm Charles Friedman. Let's have 3 hours worth of fun. 9 to noon is the time for this program. And you can reach us anytime during that, of course, except for the news breaks at the top of the hour. 831-265-5050 is the number. 831-265-5050. Don't hesitate. Remember, when you have something that's gnawing at you, something biting you, something eating your liver, call the program. You can talk about it here. And that's an absolute guarantee. We'll talk about what you want to talk about, even if it's advanced lycanthropy in Tenutuva or something like that. I don't know, whatever. The point being, you do get to set the direction of your own phone call. 831-265-5050 is the number. So pour that second cup of coffee and let's get underway. Where do we go first today? Well, there's been a considerable amount of conjecture, speculation on this New York mayor's race. And you've got this guy, Mamdani, running as a Democratic socialist. Well, forget the Democratic, he's a socialist. And essentially, he's the Fidel Castro of New York. And I say that advisedly, because there's a lot more to Fidel Castro than you might think. In my hands at this moment, I'm holding a copy of Coronet magazine. Did you ever hear of Coronet magazine? I don't know when it went out of publication. This particular copy is dated February of 1958. Now, why in the world do I have this? Actually, I came across a box of old magazines one time, and this one was interesting to me because on the front cover, there's a picture of a young lady, as there always is, but down at the bottom it says, "Exclusive, Why We Fight by Fidel Castro, leader of Cuba's revolution." I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. There are actually 2 articles in this mag. This is an American magazine. This is the type of thing you'd expect to find at the checkout stand at the supermarket. You know, the TV Guide and Time and Coronet and Red Book, Ladies' Home Journal, all those magazines that they no longer have anymore. But this was, not regarded as something outside of the main stream of American thinking. Quite the contrary. This magazine is marketed to Middle America. So we've got 2 articles in here. One of them, of course, is the one that's touted on the front cover. Why We Fight by Fidel Castro. And here's an idealized portrait of Castro. Bear in mind, this was published in February of 1958. 1 year later, Castro had successfully overthrown the government of Cuba and commenced his lifetime dictatorship of that island. So the other piece is the one just before. A Visit with a Revolutionary by Andrew St. George. High in the wild hills of Cuba, Fidel Castro wages war against the dictator Batista. Here's a reporter's full story. The first time, in his own words, Castro's idealistic blueprint for liberty. And again, another portrait of Castro. This time, he's posing with a scope-sighted rifle. And he's got his ball cap on, and he has an idealistic look in his eyes. I'm not going to read this to you. It would take too long. But suffice it to say that Mr. St. George is slack-jawed in admiration at this man whom he describes as a George Washington of Cuba. Now, that rumbling sound you heard is Washington turning over in his grave and being even peripherally compared to this despot. And I look at this. The reason I keep it is because it reminds me of just how misinformed Americans were about Fidel Castro and who he was and what his ideas were. I suggest that we are just as misinformed today about Zoran Mamdani. That's why I made the comparison. it strikes me that this is another example of people simply being utterly blind or intentionally misled as to who they're dealing with. Now, this is a political program, and of course, politics are all about elections. Is so-and-so going to win? Is so-and-so going to lose, etc.? At the moment, if you're thinking of putting some money on the New York City mayor election, you would be well advised to bet your money on Zohran Mamdani. Now, obviously, it doesn't make me happy to say that, but I am looking at the dynamics of this, and I see Mamdani as the leader of the ultra-left in New York. He's the candidate of the ultra-left. Now, they don't have a majority, not even in New York City, but the problem is that the opposition is split, not 2 ways, but 3 ways. You have Andrew Cuomo, the vexed former governor who was defeated in the primary after running a lackluster campaign. You have Curtis Sliwa, a perennial candidate on the Republican side with his red beret and basically little else. And you have the current mayor, Eric Adams, who is so unpopular that in polls of all 4 candidates, the incumbent mayor, Eric Adams, places 4th in a field of 4. He's even behind the Republican. That does some doing. And here's the maraschino cherry on the top of this sundae. Actually, there are 2 maraschino cherries. One of them is that none of these 3 anti-Mamdani candidates shows any sign of looking at the numbers and saying, I don't have a chance to win, but maybe we can stop this guy. I'm going to get out and throw my support to this other fellow. Ask my voters to vote for him. That's the one maraschino cherry for Mamdani. Nobody's talking about doing this. All 3 of these candidates seem determined to stay in to the bitter end. But, and here's the other maraschino cherry, what if they did do that? What if Sliwa and Adams looked at the polls and said, well, right now, the guy who's running the strongest race against Mamdani is Cuomo. And it's not close. Cuomo is got far more votes than either Sliwa or the incumbent mayor, Adams. So, Adams and Sliwa both bow out and say, we're urging all our supporters, all the people who would have voted for us, vote for Andrew Cuomo. At this point, you're going to be saying to me, well, Charles, didn't Mamdani already beat Cuomo once? And yes, obviously you have been paying attention. Very good. Give yourself a gold star. And why did Mamdani beat Cuomo? Because Cuomo is dull as dishwater, over the hill, and has nothing going for him except he can raise money. But there have been plenty of examples of candidates who've raised and spent plenty of money and still don't win elections. Money ain't votes. Mamdani has buzz. Mamdani has glitz. Mamdani has life, brio. Cuomo, a flat souffle. And here's the bonus. Neither Mayor Adams nor Curtis Sliwa show any more sign of political life than Cuomo does, particularly Mayor Adams. Sliwa, being the streetwise guy that he is, actually has the ability to come to life. But then again, he's running as a Republican in a town where Donald Trump is not exactly popular. So What's the betting? What's the outcome? Almost certainly, and again, I do not want this. I won't be happy with it, but almost certainly, New York City is going to elect a mayor who makes Bill de Blasio look solid. And it's a dirty shame. It really is. Because New York City has, you would think, learned its lesson just a few years ago. It's amazing that anything could go so wrong so fast. David DeRosiers of Real Clear Politics writes today, progressive bonfire of the vanities. Now, DeRosiers is red hot for Mayor Adams. He issues a great critique of Mamdani, points out that Rudy Giuliani succeeded in bringing New York back. This is when? 90s? Early 90s. I think Giuliani was elected mayor in 91, 92, something like that. And within his first term, crime was down like 70%. It was just an incredible turnaround. Entire blocks of New York City came back to life, reclaimed from vagrants and criminals who were the only people who bothered to live there or even attempted to. Buildings that had been abandoned by their landlords suddenly became hot properties, renovated, rented to decent citizens, to small businesses. Retail came back in New York. Something like 50, 60,000 new jobs in retail, working in stores, serving customers. Wow. And of course, that was before they legalized shoplifting in New York, which really is a death knell to that business model. You cannot conduct retail in an atmosphere where shoplifting is not strictly prohibited. This is what Mamdani evidently still hasn't learned. He also wants to defund the police. My God, didn't they already go through that once? But no, this is what the cards hold for New York. And it worries me because the fact that such an appalling individual could win an election in a major venue. New York may be marginal, it's obviously considerably to the left of the rest of the country, but nevertheless, even there, rationality could be expected to prevail. Not now. And if this is where the Democratic Party is going, and it appears to be, the rising stars of the Democratic Party are not the Dean Phillipses, are not the John Fettermans. The rising stars of the Democratic Party are the squad, or the gang of four, as I like to refer to them. Mamdani getting elected mayor of New York City is going to make him a big man in the Democratic Party. And when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez challenges and defeats Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer next year for the U.S. Senate, and then gets elected, which she almost certainly will, wowie kazowie. At that point, American politics is on it's like a grenade with the pin pulled. All that has to happen is for the Democrats to win one election. Just one. That's the end of the country. Just as Mamdani winning in New York is going to be the end of New York City. David Dinkins was bad enough, but Rudy Giuliani was able to pull the city back together. After Mamdani, I don't think it's going to be possible. There is such a thing as a point of no return. Whether you're traveling across the ocean or whether you're navigating the stormy seas of politics and history. America's 250th anniversary is coming up next year. Historically, great nations, great societies have lasted 200 years. We got an extra 50 years tacked on, courtesy of Ronald Reagan, who was president nearly 50 years ago. At a time when many people were saying, oh, well, era of limits, we've been past our great years, and etc. From now on, America's in permanent decline. Reagan said, nonsense. Our best years are ahead of us. He led a rebirth, not just of the American economy, but of the American spirit, which is really the secret to the whole thing. Success or failure comes from between your ears. Reagan understood that. And he succeeded in restoring that faith for a generation or two of Americans. I've heard people say, where's the next Reagan coming from? The answer to that, the short answer, he ain't. If you read his bio, his story, the incubator that spawned him no longer exists. Talked about this a little last week, the idea that for its first 150 years, the time of its greatest growth, Americans did not see the state as a guarantor of their material well-being. Up until the Great Depression, up until the 1930s, no American looked to the government for financial support or succor. Reagan, being born in 1911, grew to, manhood in that period of time and had that particular mentality infused into him. People younger than him never experienced it. And today, there's virtually no one alive. Matter of fact, I guess there isn't. Let me see. You would have had to have been born about, you'd have to be well over 110 years old. Forget about it. So it's a generational change, which has now caused an ideological change. And today, it's generally considered boilerplate. Americans, the government has to help me. The government has to support me. The government has to feed me. The government has to house me. And that's not going to change. And in such an atmosphere, attempts to restore America will crash against those rocks. If America is to be restored, it would have to be because people went back to the original idea of individual responsibility, individual liberty. And that ain't happening anytime soon. Okay. What time we got? 9:26. A couple of minutes worth of ads, and I'll be right back. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. I would love to hear from you.
The Hook is California's first ever cannabis outlet. 100% locally owned and operated, we're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. We believe that everyone should have access to fairly priced cannabis. So we work hard to get it to you for 30 to 50% less than the other guys. If you're 21 or older with a valid ID, visit us in Capitola or in Watsonville today. We're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. Check out our website, hookoutlet.com, for deals and stay groovy.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. 25 years ago, my husband Rudy and I opened Charlie Hong Kong with the commitment to serve healthy food grown in healthy soil. Today, the healthy food we serve comes from the sacred land in Pajaro Valley, where Dick Peugeot and his Lakeside Organics grow the soil, and the soil grows the healthy plant that we serve to you. When you eat at Charlie Hong Kong, you eat healthy food, and it's delicious. Charlie Hong Kong, Santa Cruz.
Tomatoes, carrots, radishes, onions, squash, watermelon, all things we must eat regularly to survive. Hi folks, Warren Knox here. Wouldn't it be great to just walk out your front or back door and right there you can pick pesticide and chemical-free food that you grew? You could do just that with a Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, elevated garden box that will allow you to grow just about any vegetable or flower there is. Sold assembled or unassembled, shipped worldwide. The therapy of gardening is just a call away. You can find your Knox Garden Box built in Scotts Valley, California, or log on to www.knoxgardenbox.com. Our staff will answer any questions on gardening, so if you don't have a green thumb, believe we can see that you do. Okay, phone number to call is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Okay, we've just spent a few moments looking at the realities of the New York mayor's race. Who's running? What are their shticks? Who's going to win? And, of course, we come to the rather obvious conclusion that the anti-Mamdani vote, having been split not two but three ways among three, shall we be gentle and say, weak candidates. Three weak candidates, none of whom, even standing alone, would probably prevail against this bright, shiny object, this Fidel Castro type character. Well, what about our nation? The latest thing to come along in national politics has been the rather unpredictable Elon Musk and his threat to form a new political party, the America Party, he says. You know, I had forgotten about this, I will admit, but Matthew Lieberman writing today reminds me that it wasn't that long ago that his father, that's right, Joe Lieberman, longtime Connecticut senator, Democratic vice presidential nominee in 2000, his father spent the last years of his life dedicating to a political movement called No Labels. No Labels. Now, this was essentially an effort to launch a third way in American politics. It lacked the support of a charismatic person like Elon Musk. It lacked the monetary support that Elon Musk can provide. And it lacked the catchy name of the America Party. That sounds a lot better than No Labels. I mean, No Labels sounds like, where'd they come from? Anyway, Lieberman writes today that Elon Musk and the America Party that he announced July 5th promise a well-funded challenge to the two-party status quo. My late father, Joe Lieberman, spent much of his last energy on preparing a third-party challenge in 2024, known as the No Labels policy. This effort would have run a bipartisan unity ticket for president and vice president if the two major parties produced candidates that most Americans could do without. The unity ticket did not materialize, largely because both parties, mainly the Democrats, thoroughly demonized it. They called it a threat to democracy because they thought it would lead to Mr. Trump's reelection. No Labels employees were publicly identified and doxxed. Donors grew leery. Potential candidates were openly threatened with political oblivion if they became part of this bipartisan effort. The American Party seemed to have tweaked the anger of Republicans more than Democrats. Now, here is where Mr. Lieberman has put his finger on something that is a crucial part of this difference. it gives us, conservatives, it gives us some comfort to be able to say, well, the mainstream media no longer has its monopoly on news provision and distribution in America. There are broadcast outlets on radio. There are a lot of online sources where people can go and get a narrative that is not slavishly loyal to the one you get from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Associated Press, etc. But it is also absolutely imperative to remember that these, as the old establishment media still has plenty of clout and is not to be counted out. When Matthew Lieberman writes here about the campaign that was undertaken against No Labels, this was a campaign that was led by the establishment media, and he has the reasons correctly. Democrats perceived this as a potential division of an anti-Trump vote. And they may have been correct. The one thing we'll never know is how it would have panned out, because No Labels never got round to coalescing around any individual. It was simply, okay, we have a third party here, we have this third way, but there's no human face on it. And in American politics, you can't beat somebody with nobody. People vote for human beings. When you go in and look at a ballot, you don't find issue positions there. You find the names of human beings. And those are the people for whom you vote, or don't. No Labels never even got that far. Now, the America Party doesn't seem to have got that far either, but it would seem to me that it would have to be Elon Musk, wouldn't it? Elon Musk is going to use a lot of his money, set up this America Party, and then some other putz is going to get up and say, okay, vote for me. Does that make sense to you? No. No, if this is going to have any credence at all, it's going to have to be Mr. Musk's party. Just as back in the 90s, Ross Perot did not find and support some other guy to run for president. No, Ross Perot got out there and he did it himself. And he succeeded in throwing a monkey wrench into American politics. I don't know that Bill Clinton would have beaten George Bush in 1992 if Perot hadn't been on. Probably so, because after all, Clinton was a very, very skillful and attractive politician. George Bush was an incompetent, constantly tripping over himself, getting in his own way, doing foolish things, looking at his watch during debates. I mean, that was a typical thing for him. Throwing up on the Japanese prime minister. It was kind of like, you remember Jimmy Carter and the Killer Rabbit? You don't? Yeah, he was out in a rowboat or something, and there was this bunny swimming by, and he's striking at it with the oar. It was the damnedest thing you ever saw. Or Mike Dukakis with the giant helmet on and the tank. There are certain politicians who just present themselves, and nobody does this to them. They do it to themselves. And they just look like, you're going to vote for that guy? Oh, please. So Mr. Musk, it seems to me, if his America Party is to have any impact at all, Mr. Musk is going to have to lead it. Now, frankly, I wonder, will he or won't he? Not that long ago, he stepped away from the Department of Governmental Efficiency because he needed to get back to running the businesses. Businesses, plural. I mean, if it was just X, or if it was just SpaceX, or if it was just Tesla, or it was just the Boring Company, or any of these individual enterprises he has, any one of which would occupy the energies of a dedicated manager and entrepreneur. But Mr. Musk has, what, 5 or 6 of them? I must admit, I stand in awe of this guy. He is amazing. But when it comes to politics, he is also a naif. He's, like a 5-year-old kid. Whereas he has the most thorough understanding you can imagine of the businesses he runs, his political understanding would fit into a thimble with room left over for Joe Biden's integrity. So is he going to do this? Does he have the time? Is he so desperate to do this? Because, and here's the question, Ross Perot did what he did because he wanted George Bush out of the White House. He felt, if I do this, I can pull enough votes away from Bush, the Democrats can nominate Rollo, and he'll win. As it turned out, it was just about that way. As I mentioned, Bill Clinton was a very attractive politician, but he certainly was nobody's idea of an ideal presidential candidate. American people aren't generally attracted to habitual liars, habitual career liars. That's Bill Clinton. Constitutionally incapable of telling the truth. There's one place where George Bush had it over him. But by the time Perot got through, it was all over with shouting. So Perot didn't run to become president. He ran to kibosh Bush. If Elon Musk follows through on this American Party thing, it is not going to be elected president. Elon Musk, he couldn't take the pay cut, for God's sake. He has far too much on his plate to bother being president of the United States. But he might be so piqued at Donald Trump that he'll do anything. Of course, Trump won't be on the ballot next time around. We all know that. Now, I know he jived around about it. Well, you never know that. Don't be ridiculous. Uncle Don ain't going to be running again. That's all there is to it. So, who will the Republican nominee be? J.D. Vance? Ron DeSantis? Somebody essentially running to perpetuate Mr. Trump's legacy, because the Trump legacy will be what the Republican Party will rise or fall on. This is why it's so important that he get things right. Because if he doesn't, if we lose, the Democrats take over, and that's the end of everything. Quite literally. If Mr. Biden didn't prove that to you, 4 more years of him, the Republic's down the tubes. Interest on the debt occupies 40 or 50% of the entire federal budget. We have default, it's over. So elections are no longer a matter of choices of national direction. Elections are becoming more and more a matter of national survival. Or not. Wow. Scary, isn't it? That scares the living daylights out of me. I don't know about you. But, I mean, that's playing roulette with the greatest. I mean, I'm still an old-fashioned patriot. I view America as the greatest thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. The greatest thing. But maybe it's just like New Yorkers. We were talking about them a few minutes ago. They had a mayor who came in, gave them good government, everything started working well, etc. So what do? Get them out of there. deconstruct, pull apart that model for good government. That's what Bill de Blasio did. 2 terms as mayor, and he did the entire opposite. Okay, we had a city that worked. Let's make it a city that doesn't work. Let's wreck it. Ronald Reagan back in the 80s showed us what works. Got us on a right path. Won the Cold War, for God's sake. And the years since, Democrats and even Republicans have one by one walked away from the things that he showed worked and that demonstrably worked. When you get to the position where, as a society, you intentionally and consciously walk away from successful models. Wow. What is that all about? Why do you do that? It's nuts. A successful model should be copied, emulated, maintained. America's always been a very practical society. Yeah, what works? Nowadays, we look at something that works and we say, oh, we don't like that. Here's something bright and shiny over here. Here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Here's socialism. Yeah, sure, that's going to make everything better. Crew. Oh, well. The thing that's so annoying is that leaders peddling socialism, from Castro to Stalin to Hitler, National Socialism, again and again, the best result you can hope for is Clement Attlee in Great Britain, which succeeded in producing not a despotism like some of these others I've talked about, but rather instead a sick economy that can no longer produce growth or hope for its people, and succeeding generations of younger people becoming more and more disconnected, nihilistic. They see no opportunity for progress, for a fulfilled life, so they just say, what the heck, go on the dole, do drugs, listen to bad music, or make bad music. And that's modern Britain. So that's the best result you can get out of socialism. And it's not too good. For the worst, the sky, or shall I say the gutter, is the limit. 831-265-5050. See what else Matt Lieberman has to say about this. The American Party seems to have tweaked the anger of Republicans more than Democrats, at least for now. Whether those early Republican concerns prove warranted, it's telling that critics so far have largely ignored Mr. Musk's claim that 80% of people would welcome a third, more centrist choice. While the real number is probably lower, 58% of Americans said a third party is needed, according to a poll in 2024. It is still substantial. Instead, critics revive the same tired arguments against no labels. You're a spoiler. You can't win. How irresponsible of you. Well, no, you can't win. That's true. You're a spoiler. Yeah, right. Okay. How irresponsible. I don't know about that. If your goal is to be a spoiler, if you want to knock the props out from under the Republican Party, then this is not irresponsible at all. As a matter of fact, it's a very effective method to choose to accomplish that goal. people threw that same language at Ross Perot. Spoiler, can't win, irresponsible. Spoiler, yes, absolutely. Can't win, didn't want to win. Irresponsible, like hell. I set out to do this and I did it. What's irresponsible about that? By making these arguments, the foes of the America Party prove the need for it. The arguments are all about who will hold on to power and not what the powerful can do to reflect better a deeply dissatisfied public they supposedly represent. To put it more bluntly, party leaders want to limit us to pre-selected candidates who will listen to them more than they listen to us. It's undemocratic. If not for Ralph Nader's third party presence on the ballot in 2000, Al Gore would have been elected president. And my dad, remember this is being written by Matthew Lieberman, his father was Joe Lieberman, who was on that ticket. My dad would have been elected vice president that year. My dad, consequently, would have had a decent chance of becoming president in 2008. Even so, I never heard him disparage Mr. Nader for running that year. He understood that we live in a democracy, and a democracy at its best is a contest of ideas you need to win to get elected. He understood that saying Mr. Nader shouldn't have run would be tantamount to saying America shouldn't be a democracy. The two major parties should keep this in mind. What are they really doing when they try to kill third parties? Well, if Mr. Lieberman is right here, then the Republican establishment and Republican media sources, etc., are going to go all out to crush Elon Musk and his America Party, because it is factual, and Lieberman points it out. The no labels movement was absolutely lambasted by Democrats, by the Democratic Party establishment, by Democratic media outlets. They did. You know, this is undemocratic. What the hell is undemocratic about launching a political party? That's an idiotic argument. Yet so terrified were they, so irrational were they, that they used that argument, even though it made no sense in the world. It was actually an argument that made the presenter look stupid. I want to start a new political party. You're being undemocratic. You're being ridiculous. But didn't stop them. Because they saw the practical effect for what it would be. So this time, it's the shoe's on the other foot, quite really. Quite actually. If Elon Musk starts his America Party, if he's serious about this, and he has the money to do it, Lord knows he could fund it out of petty cash. So that would give the party, he would be able to put together an organization, satisfy the requirements of the various states to get a ballot position, etc. You'd have to hire people to circulate petitions, register voters, etc., etc. Here in California, in order to get a line on the ballot, you have to have a certain number of people actually register with your party. That's the way we do it here. So Mr. Musk would have to fund paid registrars. This is your job now, and what you do is you go out and you register people in the America Party, and each one you register, we'll pay you 50 cents or $1 or whatever the hell it is. The same way they do with petition campaigns here in California. Once again, this is the way California law is constructed, so that's what you have to do here. There are 50 states with 50 different sets of election laws. And if you're going to get into the serious business of launching this new party, you're going to have to start jumping through 50 different sets of hoops. Evan is on the line. Let's find out what's on his mind on this lovely Monday. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Happy Monday. I'm glad to hear you again, as always. You kind of touched base on a couple things that was kind of interesting. We talked about New York I'm kind of a fan of this Mangami. Honestly, I feel like there's too much going on there as far as numbers go. Your rents are going up just completely. There needs to be something. Like California here does have a that AB. What the hell is that number again? That helped us in California stabilize our rents because they're just going up constantly. Section 8, I know I'm on that. I'm on low income, and they seem to stop these landlords from raising your rent too much. Your numbers just are there, and people want to calculate the numbers and see how much New York is facing as far as their food, how much they can pay for their rent when it's $4,000 in Manhattan. That just doesn't make sense. It seems like it's happening here in San Francisco. I'm not a fan of your Democrat Party, but I'm also not a fan of your Republican Party, in which I kind of figured I'd call in and talk about your Elon Musk, because it seems like both parties are just going after him, and that's just not right. Jesse Ventura had the same thing happen with him when he won his independent race in his state. And he just doesn't seem to enjoy the fact that these Republicans and Democrats seem to go after these independents or whatever he's seeming to try. Elon Musk is seeming to try to accomplish here. Your thoughts, sir?
I'd forgotten about Jesse. Hang on a second. I know that he only served one term as governor of Minnesota. He was relieved of office at the end of one term. The question: did he simply retire, or was he actually defeated?
I think he was, honestly, for me, personally, I think he looked like he was tired of fighting both of those parties. Because, there was a video out, and he did describe how the fact that both parties seemed to go after him.
I'm sorry, that was part of what, he knew that was going to happen. He enjoyed that. No, the problem was that as governor, he did not perform well. And the people of Minnesota were in no mood to keep him in that office. So I'm looking. I can't find the damn thing in. There's nothing here about it in Wikipedia. Getting back to the bigger questions you asked. You speak for many Americans who now are looking for government to come between you and objective reality. You want to live in an area where rents are high, you don't have a lot of money. The idea of taking the available resource you have and instead moving to, say, my birthplace, Modesto, or some other place in California where rents are considerably lower, this doesn't strike you as attractive. So essentially, you're asking to remain in Santa Cruz or Manhattan or someplace like this and have government suppress rentals to where they're comfortable for you. This is essentially what you're asking is you're asking government to attempt to break the laws of economics, and of course that's not possible, not for much of a length of time. But it fits into what I was talking about earlier, the idea that too many Americans have come to look to government for their support, for their their necessities, housing, food, clothing. So as long as we continue to move in that direction, guys like Zohran Mamdani, who are willing to come along and say, "Hey, vote for me. I'll give you everything you want. I'll keep your rent down. I'll do this. I'll give you free groceries." Essentially,
if the system's broken, I can understand. Oh yeah, your system seems to be broken here too.
I'm sorry, you don't understand. That is how you break a system.
You don't understand.
You operate to essentially abrogate the laws of economics. That is how you break a system. And it's been done in other places. If it's done here, well, the results will be the same as they were in other places, and it will be to the detriment of this country.
Yeah, I think you break the system on how you vote. Here in Santa Cruz, for instance, you did mention the fact that rent control thing didn't go through. I think the fact that you have too many too many landlords and too many of these big business people that are already taking over Santa Cruz, as you can see, by the big buildings that they're going through. They're the ones that are in charge. They're the ones that are voting. We need more renters like me, possibly other callers that you have that are renting, that feel this strain of how the Democrat and Republicans are ruining your cities and ruining our lives. There are Democrats and Republicans in our Santa Cruz Council. Granted, am I correct? Or
Wait a second. Find me a Republican in Santa Cruz government. Find me one. There hasn't been a Republican.
Yeah, that's where I was.
Wait a damn second. There hasn't been a Republican in Santa Cruz government in decades. So please don't hand me that.
Well, I find them, they seem to change their political stance a lot. Like, for instance, they'll have an independent on our, they just seem to change a lot and hide themselves for sure. But anyway, going back to that Elon Musk real quick before you end here. What party did you say he was starting, sir?
He says he's calling it the American Party. It's kind of it's interesting. The last time we had a party that called itself the American Party, this goes back a little before the Civil War, and at that time the parties were the Democrats and the Whigs. This was before the Republican Party came along. The American Party was essentially, in those days, a nativist party. They didn't want anybody moving into the country. They didn't like Catholics, and essentially. They ran the party almost like a secret society. It was called, in addition to being the American Party, it was called the Know-Nothings, because when anybody asked them, well, what about the organization, your party, your platform, or anything? I know nothing. I know nothing. So there was an American Party once. Obviously, Mr. Musk there's no connection whatsoever. I wonder if Mr. Musk even knows his history well enough to understand that he's adopted a rather unfortunate name.
Yeah, well, anyway, there's a lot of parties out there. It was just kind of interesting. I figured I'd kind of call in. I know you're getting out to their end of your, up to your 10 o'clock here in less than a minute. So I'll leave you, and hopefully you got y'all the new caller to your phone number, of course, there, if you want to repeat it for everybody.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There you have it. I'll vote for whoever will give me what I want. It's 10 o'clock at Santa Cruz Voice. Okay. For the benefit of the podcast listeners, I have something here from PragerU.
Everybody knows that you should have a budget when you're handling money.
I got him! 2 tickets to Autoland.
So, about $400 for admission tickets.
How much do we have left in our trip budget?
Let's see, about $200.
A budget keeps track of earnings and spending and helps you plan for future expenses. If you spend less than what you earn on your planned expenses, you've got a budget surplus. But if you spend more than you earn, watch out. You're running a deficit.
Gas, food at the park.
$100 for a picture with Otto.
But did you know that a nation also has a budget? While much larger in scale, a national budget similarly helps a nation plan its expected revenue, mostly through taxes, and its spending for a given year. Passing a national budget is usually a heated debate between those who want to spend more and those who want to spend less.
Look, we can't afford a funnel cake and a fast pass.
But I love funnel cake.
When the government brings in more taxes than it spends, it's running a budget surplus. When the government spends more money than it brings in, it's running a budget deficit. This means there's insufficient revenue to cover the government's expected expenses.
Let's just put some of the trip on our credit card.
Are you sure?
Maybe?
Just like a person may borrow to cover a purchase they don't currently have the cash for, governments running a budget deficit often borrow money to meet their spending goals. Every time a government runs a budget deficit, the national debt, or total money owed by the government, increases. In 2023, the United States collected $4.5 trillion in taxes, but spent $6.2 trillion.
Hi, I would like to increase my credit limit.
Tell them it's for Autoland. They'll understand.
I was thinking like $2.7 trillion. Hello?
Governments primarily borrow money by selling securities, treasury notes, bills, and bonds that accrue interest. Individuals, financial institutions, businesses, or even other countries buy those securities, and the government promises to pay those parties back at a future date. But enough of those promises can significantly raise the national debt. In the short term, running a deficit and selling securities can help a government cover spending obligations. However, long term, a large national debt can bring harmful consequences, destabilizing an economy, devaluing a currency, or giving a country a reputation as a bad investment for other countries.
Mom, trust me. You know I'm good for it. Mom? Hello?
Governments can pay off national debt in two ways. One is to run a budget surplus, spending less than what they expect to bring in through taxes and putting the extra money aside to pay down the debt. Another way governments try to pay off debt is by issuing more securities to raise money to pay for previous borrowing, which often just increases the national debt. A country with a high national debt and an unstable economy will seem like a credit risk, making it difficult to borrow. This could lead to default, which is when a borrower doesn't pay back a lender according to the terms of the agreement.
The U.S. national debt is $36 trillion. I think we're in trouble.
While any national debt is serious, the number itself needs context. It's important to consider debt in relation to a country's size, economy, productivity, the reasons for that debt, and even the amount of economic freedom. The most common metric used to put the debt into context is the debt to GDP ratio, but that's a whole other episode.
So, how will we pay for this?
Don't worry, I'll figure it out.
Another important thing to consider is just like payments on credit card debt, payments on a country's national debt often include interest. That's a fee, often a fixed percentage of a loan, that has to be paid on top of the amount borrowed. These extra fees can add up and make them much more expensive. In 2023, the United States owed around $875 billion in interest on its national debt.
$875 billion? That sounds like trouble.
You said it.
It's not easy to reduce a nation's debt, but it's possible. With some proper budgeting and reduced government spending, some of the economic wealth of the United States could go to paying down the large national debt. This will help the country avoid the ugly consequences faced by highly indebted nations in the past. A budget deficit is not ideal, but the reality is that many countries spend more than they make. A strong economy and growing GDP can potentially offset the burden of high national debt, but over time, that debt can bring crippling consequences. Understanding the national budget is part of being an informed citizen and staying aware of how government financial decisions can affect your budget.
Okay, even on a budget, that was fun.
That was fun. Hey, Otto, are you guys hiring?
Watch more at PragerUkids.com.
Okay, time to get back to work. Oh, stop it. There we go. It is 10:06. Another hour begins. The number to reach the program is 831-265-5050. Thank you, Evan, for your call from last hour, and we're looking forward to hearing from other people during the second hour. I'm Charles Friedman, and remember, when you call in, you get to decide what we discuss. I do have a couple of people who prefer to, or sometimes it's just necessary, that they make their communication via email. If you would like to email me, the address is charles78rpm@yahoo.com. So, this isn't any kind of exclusive thing. My email address is right out there for you. charles78rpm@yahoo.com. Malcolm has taken advantage of this, and he reminds me of something on this subject of Mr. Musk and his American Party. He reminds me of something that had slipped my mind. Elon Musk cannot run for president of the United States because, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, he is an American citizen, but not a natural-born American citizen, and the Constitution requires, the president and vice president, people who run for those offices, must be natural-born U.S. citizens. Now, that same qualification doesn't hold true for any other officer. You can serve in the Senate or in the House as a naturalized citizen. Governor Schwarzenegger served 2 terms as governor of California. Naturalized citizen, no problem. But he was proscribed from running for president, and so is Mr. Musk. So, Malcolm, well, let me just go ahead and share what he reads. Musk is ineligible due to being born in South Africa. He likely won't pursue the presidency. He has signaled he will support candidates at the congressional level. This is true. Now, once again, this is a very important addition to this presentation. Musk stated that he's focused on running just 2 or 3 Senate seats and 8 to 10 House districts to gain influence in contentious votes. So he sees this closely divided House and Senate, a vote, for example, on this big bill of Mr. Trump's in the Senate had to be broken by Vice President Vance, so it was a tie vote. In the House, it was a margin of just, 218 to 212, something like that, or 220 to 212, just a handful of votes. So Mr. Musk emphasized a strategy to laser focus on a small number of congressional races rather than a presidential run. According to Barron's, Musk plans to support 8 to 10 House and 2 to 3 Senate races, largely in Republican districts, using his wealth to dominate ballots across barriers. So this is essentially what I was talking about. He is going to kneecap the Republican Party. And incidentally, remember the big bill that just passed? This is what Mr. Musk is so upset about. He would have been, like Tom Massey of Kentucky. He wouldn't vote for it no matter what. So the question then comes, what will you vote for? And the answer, frankly, that is something that I don't think Mr. Musk has talked much about. Maybe Malcolm can fill me in on some of that. In this particular case here, he's reminding me of things that I had seen and had forgotten to mention. But I will confess, I haven't seen anything really about what Mr. Musk is, what his program is. Once again, I compare him with Congressman Thomas Massey of Kentucky, who runs as a Republican and gets elected, but he won't vote for Republican legislation. Now, in all fairness to Mr. Massey, he doesn't vote for Democratic legislation either. He doesn't vote for any legislation, because none of it measures up to his metaphysical standards of utopian perfection, or whatever it is he wants. A shibboleth of this show is that what you see depends upon where you stand. Well, oops, hey, what about this? We've got a couple of people here who want to talk. I'll take Zach's call first and then Michael's. Okay, let's get this. Hello, Zach. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Hey, thanks for taking the call.
Yes.
Just a few. Yeah, really enjoying your shows the past few days. I wish I was able to call in. Anyway. So about your caller Evan, I've been listening to him talk about rent control for a few days, and I just had to address it. So there's a book I could recommend to him by Thomas Sowell, and it's called Basic Economics, and it's a really, 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 really good, informative book that talks about why rent control is probably the worst policy to ever exist. It doesn't do anything positive. In fact, what ends up happening is once rent control is implemented, what ends up happening, and New York has done this before. This is history, actual history. The buildings end up becoming vacant, and they can't, because it's too expensive to rent to people because of all the red tape and regulation and the rent control. It's just not worth it. And what ends up happening is the building, it deteriorates the whole neighborhood, and they end up having to sell to the lowest buyer, or multinational corporations like somebody in China, for instance, or who knows. It doesn't work out for the citizens of the city at all. That's one thing. And also it can even drive prices higher and make if rent is capped, it could make the cap too high. What I'm saying is that's just it's really bad. And you'll find, if he reads the book, he'll find that it's really bad to mess with the free market. It's like this, messing with physics. You throw a ball up, the ball comes down.
Yeah, you can defy the laws of gravity for as long as it takes the ball to keep rising, and then gravity takes over and it comes back down. Economic laws function the same way, but Evan doesn't care. He wants his rent lower, and if that involves some kind of government coercion, a state coming in and saying your rent will be $1,000 a month and it can't ever rise, that's fine with him. But again, as a policy for a city or a state, it is poisonous, because it is in violation of the laws of economics. And as you pointed out, if somebody comes in and says that's the rent, well, the landlord is not going to be interested in renting at that price, and instead he'll simply close out his rental, let it sit vacant, because he'll lose less money that way.
Right. Yeah, you red tape a landlord, the supposed bad guy landlord, which he's not a bad guy. He's just, and yeah, it's a profit-making business like any business.
Has to be.
That's what business is.
Yeah, nobody works for free.
You don't do it for free. It's not a charity. Right. And, I could go on and on about rent control. But another thing about the Elon Musk's party, I'd like to address that.
Yeah.
I'll just do it real quick because I know you have another caller. That party, the reason why people are pissed at him, it's just look back at history, just like rent control. Look back at history and what Ross Perot did, and all it's going to do is take away votes from the primary party, either Republican or Democrat, probably Republican, because I don't even know. Like you had a caller, Phil, like last week, I think, bring up a really good point. He says, "What's the demographic of Elon Musk? Who's going to really vote for him? Young kids? Okay, maybe, but then they look at, Elon's got a lot of bad publicity with this whole, being friends with Trump thing.
Mm-hmm.
So who's his demographic really? Is it like a bunch of like tech bros in Silicon Valley? I don't know. It's interesting that he wants to start his own party, which he can't even run as president for. It's just, I don't know what he's doing, but it's just, and that's why people are pissed at him. To answer another question, Evan was, just like a Jesse Ventura, and Ross Perot did it. You look at the history of Ross Perot, he threw a big wrench in the gears and took away, that whatever it was percentage of votes from Bush, and made Clinton a 2-term president. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you that
You got it.
the idea the idea that landlords outvote rent control. I'm sorry, landlords are not numerous enough to outvote rent control. The reason it lost in Santa Cruz because over time we've still had a few people there who understand that markets are the only credible thing to set prices. And quoting Thomas Sowell and Basic Economics, that's a book that should be a part of the curriculum of every school student in the country.
Absolutely. No, it's a really it's easy to read. It's not hoity-toity at all. It's just really down to earth and hits the points, hits all the nails on the head.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Let us take. I'm going to preface this call from Michael. I called him before the program today and asked him to give us a buzz because, and here's the reason. For the last several days, I've been watching ghastly YouTube videos showing me floods and dam collapses and everything under the sun in China. And in our American newspapers, I saw, we had kind of the same thing on a much smaller scale in Texas. And I see plenty of pictures of that. But the far larger, just mega worse situation in China, I looked through the paper, I don't see a word about it. So I actually began to wonder, did it actually happen? And so I thought I'd call, Michael Olson does the program China Now, Thursdays on the program. He is our resident China hand. So, Michael, is it really happening or not?
Yes, it is really happening. But the question is, why isn't it happening in the press, in the American press? That's another interesting part of it. But China does flood, and it has flooded often over the course of millennium.
Right.
And there are two reasons. One is geographical, and the other is human. And so I can kind of give you a quick thumbnail, if you will, of the situation. So China's rains, when it does rain, it rains profusely. They're known as the plum rains. And they're known as the plum rains because they come when the plums are ripe on the tree. Mm-hmm. And the plums are ripe on my tree, so I know it's the season of the plum rains.
Okay.
And that's what's going on in China. So largely, they're responsible, the typhoons that boil in off the South China Sea and Philippine Sea and slam into the Chinese mainland are the cause of the profuseness of the rain.
So a typhoon, that's far eastern for hurricane, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So we're getting the same type of storms here that we read about, like Katrina in Louisiana, or the storms that hit Florida quite frequently. We have experience with the same things here in the United States, and it's extreme weather, and it's part of the world's weather pattern that has been going on forever. It's not something new and different.
Forever. That's correct. The magnitude of China's flooding is pretty much controlled by the geography. Mm-hmm. Now, China has two main river systems. That in the north, the Huanghe, is also called the Yellow River. And the one in the south, of course, is the Yangtze. And they both kind of go through two different kinds of China. Up in the north, the Yellow River, it's called the Yellow River because of the amount of sediment that it carries. It's probably the most sediment-filled river in the world, when it gets right down to it, because it emanates from the Loess Plateau, just south of the Gobi Desert, up in north central China.
I'm glad you elaborated on that because I had always assumed that it was because there were so many people upstream urinating in it. I'm glad to hear that was incorrect.
Well, that could be true as well, but it gets right down to it because there's a lot of people that live in China. But at any rate, the Yellow River comes out of that Loess Plateau and carries with it all of that fine Loess sand particles, and those sand particles build up in the riverbed, and it actually raises the level of the river.
Right.
So through the millennium, the Chinese people have built dikes to hold back the Yellow River, And as they have kept building up these dikes, it keeps flooding and the dikes break and it floods out throughout the northern, central, or eastern part of China in the great flat area around Beijing, which constitutes a huge chunk of China's agriculture. So it's all flat ground, and when the dikes break, that water spreads out over millions of acres. Now, so what the Chinese people have done over the millennium is kept building up the dikes. And as they keep building up the dikes, the river keeps raising itself with the sediment that deposits in the bottom of the river. And so you get in certain places in China, you have the effect of a hanging river, which is to say the river is flowing above the area of the surrounding farmland. So it just keeps building up the dikes and building up the dikes and building up the dikes, and the elevation of the river keeps going up and up and up and up. And once those dams break, once the dikes break, the river just spreads out over huge areas. In 1938, when the Chinese people were trying to keep the Japanese forces from progressing toward Beijing, they broke the dike, and during that 1938 flood, close to 1 million people were drowned in the breaking of that dam. So they have huge floods in the north.
Okay.
And that's why the Yellow River has also been called by the Chinese people for many years China's sorrows, because it's always breaking and it's always flooding and it's always destroying so much of what Chinese people build up. And down in the south, you have a different kind of river in the Yangtze. And because the Yangtze flows through a lot of mountainous areas and is much dammed up. When the Chinese Communist Party took over China in 1949, they started building dams, and they've been damming the rivers in China up ever since. Of course, the culmination of that is the Great Three Gorges Dam, which is the huge dam that holds back so much of the water that otherwise would flow down the Yangtze River through Shanghai and the Pearl River Delta. And it also floods, because what happens is that when the rains hit those mountains and the water just pours off the mountains down into the Yangtze, the water level builds up. And sometimes one of the dams breaks. And when a dam breaks, all the water pours out of the dam and roars down the riverbed into the next dam.
Yeah, we're talking about a huge number of dams here, aren't we? I mean, in the Yangtze system, it's not a matter of a few dozen dams; it's a matter of hundreds.
Well, hundreds, especially when you consider all the tributaries, that are dammed up. So everything's dammed up everywhere.
And some of these, from what I understand, were rather hastily and imperfectly constructed, to be gentle.
Yeah, tofu drag dams, as it were, which is what a lot of China is built on, is tofu drag project. What is tofu drag? Well, when people cut costs, they use inferior materials, and that inferior material is often referred to as the dregs of making tofu. It looks like cement, but it isn't.
I get you.
So, okay. So at any rate, these are two different kinds of river. And of course, the great fear of China, someday the Three Gorges Dam will break. And if that happens, it will just be incredibly devastating, because you have all of these big cities downstream, including Shanghai, that would just get flooded out. And the extent of damage that would cause would just be mind-boggling. And so you have these two river systems. They often flood, often cause tremendous loss in lives and property. And why it is not reported in American media, I suspect there's two reasons. One, by and large, Americans aren't interested in what's happening in China. And two, I suspect China is not interested in having what's happening in China be broadcast on American television.
This is
And they have
this
a
is
lot
the
of
critical
impact.
point that I wanted to ask you about, because one of the points that has been made in the videos that I've looked at is that the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, is clamping down hard on anybody who I don't know how they got these videos out. It strikes me that what I'm looking at must have been spirited out of the country somehow, electronically or physically or whatever. But the government does not want any reporting on this. They are lowballing damage estimates. They are lowballing death tolls. They're essentially figuring, if nobody finds out about this, or if very few people find out about this, then it never happened in terms of public impact. And they're being really fairly successful at it.
That's very true. The Chinese Communist Party only wants to project strength, never wants anybody to think weakness of it. And so whenever something happens, the Chinese people are quick to really grab video of it and throw it up on the internet. And the Chinese Communist Party is always just a little bit slower than them in taking it down. And that interval between when something is posted and when it is taken down, people grab it and spirit it out of the country. And that's why on YouTube, you'll often see news that is not in either the American press or the Chinese press. And they have such a tight hold on what gets out. When you and I are over there in that neck of the woods, sailing around with the U.S. Navy, I was always captivated by what was just over the horizon there in China, because they knew it to be one of the world's great civilizations. And when I would bring up the subject with a local, they would always kind of shrug their shoulders and turn their head, and I didn't want to talk about what's going on over there, because what was going on over there was the great cultural revolution and the great leap forward. A lot of people were dying. Everybody knew it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And very little news got out of China as soon as the CCP took over in 1949. The only news that they would let out are those people who would let in to tell the story. And for example, Edgar Snow, who wrote Red Star Over China, was one of a number of people who were allowed in to tell the great story of the Chinese culture or Chinese Communist Party. And similarly, the Walter Duranty for the New York Times.
I was just thinking of him.
1937, I believe it was.
I was just thinking. Now, did he
That's
go
the
to
same
China
kind
too?
of story.
Duranty was the guy who went to the Soviet Union in the early 30s at a time of
Yeah.
great famines and purges and things, and wrote a series of articles for his newspaper, the New York Times, telling that, oh, hey, there's no depression here, everything is wonderful. He won a Pulitzer Prize for these works of fiction, but he didn't think they were works of fiction. He was spoon-fed a false narrative by his hosts, and he swallowed all of it whole. As a journalist, it's the most gross incompetence you can possibly imagine. You're allowing the wool to be pulled over your eyes. Now, you're telling me that this same clown actually went to China later on? I hadn't known that.
Well, it wasn't Walter Duranty that went there. It was other people like him.
Okay.
In a similar situation.
So it was the comparison that
The
struck
big
me.
one.
I get
the most,
you.
Yeah. The most famous one was Edgar Snow, who wrote Red Star Over China.
Uh-huh.
And it was a portrait of how great the CCP was at re-engineering an 8,000-year-old civilization. How they're going to make everything better, Just like Durant said of the Stalin's Communist Party.
Well, I tell you what
So
I'm going to
what they allowed to get out.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break right now for a couple of minutes, and during that break, I'm going to ask you a question right now, and I'm going to give you the 2 minutes to reflect on it, okay? And I know you'll understand this question when I ask it. Is it any possibility that this tremendous dislocation, these disasters, etc., will they possibly cause the mandate of heaven to shift?
Save money on airfare to anywhere. Low Cost Air is the discount supermarket for all domestic and foreign airlines. A funny thing is going to happen when you call Low Cost Air. You're going to talk to a human being within 60 seconds. Save money on airfare to anywhere. Call Low Cost Air to compare at 800-704-1662. 800-704-1662.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Do you have a car sitting around you want to get rid of? Donate your car and help veterans and their families. Yes, one fast call to the Veteran Car Donation Program and we'll come and remove your car for free. You can donate most cars, trucks, or SUVs in most conditions. The proceeds raised goes to help active military, veterans, and their families. And you get a tax deduction. Operators are standing by. Here's the number.
800-640-9509. Again, that's 800-640-9509.
Treehouse dispenses not only the finest cannabis products, but information to those who want to know how to use cannabis for maximum benefit. Hello, I'm Jenna. If you would like to know how best to use cannabis, ask your friends and neighbors at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 Soquel Drive. If you're 21 plus with a valid ID, no appointment is necessary and the information is free. Order online at ourtreehouse.io and pick up at our drive-thru. See you soon.
Okay, at 10:33, we are back once again, enjoying the company of Michael Olson on the Charles Friedman radio program. Michael is one of the principals of Santa Cruz Voice. His program, China Now, is aired on Thursdays at 4 in the afternoon. Do not miss it. But I asked him to call the program today because of all the dislocation going on in China today, and I left him with the question, would this possibly shift the mandate of heaven? Now, not everybody might not understand just what is meant, Michael, by the Chinese term mandate of heaven, so you might begin by making a brief explanation of that.
Okay, but I'll begin by giving a brief correction to the time. China Now is on Thursdays from 3 to 5.
3 to 5. I'm sorry.
3 to 5.
Let's get that right.
No problem. No problem. And of course, you can always find it archived on the as a podcast, as a recording on the SantaCruzVoice.com website. So, mandate of heaven is that which is a very interesting concept for the Chinese Communist Party, because the mandate of heaven says heaven is allowing you to be the emperor. You have a mandate from heaven to govern China. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, being atheist in nature, where they would get a mandate from heaven if they don't believe in heaven, I don't know. But the mandate of heaven is still held in great esteem by the people of China, who believe that as long as the ruling emperor, which in this case is Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, as long as he has the mandate of heaven, everything will go okay. But when heaven decides enough of this emperor, things start to happen that are cataclysmic, such as floods and famines and all kinds of hellfire and damnation. And so the $64 trillion question on the table right now was, will the cataclysmic floods that are now inundating China precipitate a change in Chinese leadership? Or in other words, has the mandate of heaven been lifted from the CCP? And the answer to that is, we'll have to wait and see, because it could very well be.
So it's not a bad question, it's just that we don't know the answer yet.
That is absolutely true. There's all kinds of signs pointing to trouble for the CCP as we speak. Principally, the changing of the guard in Beijing that's been taking place over the past maybe 1.5 years. Whereas Xi Jinping had, for the last 13 years, been preparing for the invasion of Taiwan by, one, building up his military, and two, reorganizing his economy. It looked like things were really going to get hot and heavy, and we were going to go to war, have to go to war to stop the CCP from taking over Taiwan, which they have never owned, by the way. So things were progressing in that direction, but all of a sudden, things started happening in Beijing. Principally, a lot of Xi Jinping's principal advisors started disappearing and being arrested for corruption. Now, all CCP officials are corrupt, because that's how you advance in the CCP, is by taking bribes and making things happen. So, in effect, everybody's taking bribes, so everybody's corrupt. So, it's easy to purge your enemies by just arresting them for being corrupted. And Xi Jinping started his reign 12 years ago by doing just that, by clearing house, arresting everybody for corruption, installing all of his own people in those positions, both in the military and in the Chinese Communist Party. So he had everything pretty much lined up for this great invasion of Taiwan, which would be his destiny. That was going to be his signatory advance of the Chinese Communist Party, to take back Taiwan, and in doing so, gain access to the entire South China Sea and the Western Pacific. That China, or Taiwan, think of Taiwan as the cork in the bottle. It's really what stands between China and the rest of the Western Pacific. So if they could take over Taiwan, everything's there. And they had built the Navy to do it, and an army. And everything was poised to happen. But of a sudden, Xi started losing his supporters. They've been fucked off one right after the other by who, I don't know who, forces greater than Xi Jinping in the CCP. But the biggest indicator that things are really going south for him was that all of the generals that he had installed in the Chinese military started disappearing. And now they're pretty much all gone. So Xi Jinping does not appear to have control of the guns anymore. And so that would be the greatest indicator that perhaps these floods could very well precipitate the lifting of the mandate of heaven. Plus, you also have an economy that's collapsing all around them in a spectacular fashion, with Trump's tariffs on manufactured goods being only the latest in many things. China built up its modern world and borrowed money. And it had borrowed so much money that essentially it can't pay it back now. So you have the economy, you have the military and the political dissolution. So things are very well poised for that mandate of heaven to be lifted.
Now,
which would be great news for the entire world.
Now, the last time there was a shift in the mandate of heaven was when it shifted from the KMT, the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek's party, to Mao Zedong and the CCP. So that was, well, in the 40s, obviously within living memory. So the idea that once again there could be a shift in the mandate of heaven, and this is, how would I explain it? It's a concept of public acceptance, and it confers legitimacy.
All of the above. Yes. And then, you know, when natural phenomena start to appear to be backing this notion that the mandate of heaven is being lifted. You know, you have cataclysmic floods, you have signs in the heavens, all kinds of things. People start looking for signs.
Insane heat waves.
Right? Yeah, insane heat waves, the works, whatever it is, starts to be interpreted as a sign from heaven that the mandate might indeed be lifted. Now, I have an associate on China Now, Nan Su, who's a senior investigative reporter of Epoch Times, who lived in China, who lived the Chinese Communist Party experience. And his comment is, don't bank on this happening. Prepare, prepare, prepare. His comment is, if you think Xi Jinping getting kicked out of the CCP is the end of the CCP, forget about it. And if you think somebody nice in the CCP takes over and it will change things, forget about it. The Chinese Communist Party lives to take over the world. And it has been monitoring the failure of the Russian Communist Party. And what happened to Russia, the CCP is not about to let that happen to the CCP. So his view, when I say, hey, you know, maybe this CCP is just going to collapse and all go away, don't bank on it. You know, keep your powder dry and be ready.
See, that makes all kinds of sense to me. And the other thing I'm thinking, though, in 1949, you had two leaders and two political forces struggling with each other. Today, you have the CCP being undermined in many ways, both economically and even meteorologically, but there is nobody else.
You know, there is. And this is my silly notion. There is. And it's just across the Taiwan Strait. It's the Taiwanese government is the other.
I can't see that. You know, the Taiwanese have never made any noises since the 1950s, when Chiang Kai-shek was still leading. You know, he had a 600,000 man army on Taiwan, and there were a couple of times during the Eisenhower administration. Well, we're going to unleash Chiang Kai-shek. He's going to storm back to China and depose the communists. It was all a pipe dream, and everyone understood that, including Chiang, fortunately. So he never tried it because it, you know, would have gotten a lot of people killed, probably him too. But now you're talking about the idea of how somehow Taiwan invades, conquers, and occupies China. I don't see it. The minnow doesn't swallow.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Well, how would the minnow go about swallowing the whale? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, let me explain. I'll try to.
Okay.
And this is just a Michael Wolfism, so take it for what it's worth. In China, you have 1.4 billion people, which is probably, when it gets right down to it, less than 1 billion people, all of whom know what happened to Taiwan and how the Taiwanese are now, relatively speaking, a happy, prosperous, intelligent, modern people.
Do the Chinese people
And
know
you
that?
see, yes, they do. They do.
Okay.
And what they know about their system was that it was totally controlled by one party that has totally messed it up. And now people are going to be starving by the millions, and probably already are as we speak. Now, they know that there is a successful model for what China could be right across the street. And I'm not saying Taiwan is going to invade China. What I'm saying is that China might, just might, fly the white flag and surrender to Taiwan. It won't be the CCP that does it.
Michael, I don't know what you're smoking,
But-
but I'd
but-
sure love to have some.
China is going to need something to displace the CCP.
Right.
There is a successful model right there. Right there.
Well, that's true too, but given
And
the
all they would have to do is,
given the degree of control that the Communist Party is willing to exert, the idea that somehow,
as long as it has the mandate of heaven.
well, what I'm saying here
can
is
exist.
what I'm saying here is that the CCP can successfully defy the mandate of heaven. One of the axioms of this program is that a tyranny can maintain itself indefinitely, just depending on how brutal it's willing to be.
That's true. That's true. As long as it has the mandate of heaven. When the tyranny no longer has the mandate of heaven, yeah, I guess I'd have a little bit of Chinese in me here, huh?
I'd like to know. Well, yeah, so
Maybe
how
I believe
does
it.
how does the
Maybe
mandate of heaven fall away from a state that refuses to acknowledge it?
Maybe we're seeing that in the floods, or the Great Flood, or the famine, or whatever. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But it will definitely take something to break that tyranny. You're absolutely right. And I just suggest that maybe the Chinese are right. Maybe it will be the lifting of the mandate of heaven.
See, I'm
funny. Xi Jinping being the ultimate communist, does not believe in God, of course.
Oh, of course.
But he's highly suspicious. He's highly suspicious and highly superstitious. And so, I don't know, Charles. It is like my friend, my associate Nansu says.
Mm-hmm.
Don't count on it happening. Build your army, build your navy, prepare. And that's what you're saying too, because it's got to take a tyranny to be the tyranny, essentially. But maybe, just maybe, it will be the lifting of the mandate of heaven that makes the difference. And like I said, there's a successful model that the people of China can adopt, plug and play, right there in front of them.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And if you look back at the policies of the KMT in Taiwan, there was a very successful land reform back in the 50s. Chiang Kai-shek and then his son Chiang Ching-kuo were basically one-party strongmen for years until such time as the Taiwanese people grew so wealthy and successful that they refused, that they had economic freedom but not political freedom. And they finally grew to the point, hey, we want political freedom too. And we saw the same model followed in Korea, South Korea, and in Chile, where the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet was so successful in bringing about economic well-being that after 17 years of it, the people said, hey, we're no longer willing to cede control of the political realm. The difference being that when that point was reached, Chiang Ching-kuo, I believe, was still around. He stepped aside. Augusto Pinochet not only stepped aside, but he set up elections and ran for president. He lost, and when he lost, he left power. And a new government took over, and Chile's been a democracy ever since. But with the Chinese Communist Party, again, you have an institution which, when the Chinese people began to see their living standards rise and began to see hope, they took to the streets in 1989 at Tiananmen Square and were machine gunned and run over by tanks, by People's Liberation Army elements that had to be brought in from the countryside. The government was convinced that the PLA in the city would not mow down its own people, so they actually took the precaution of bringing in a bunch of thugs from the provinces who would have no hesitancy. In hindsight, it seems to me that Tiananmen Square was serving notice to Taiwan and to the rest of the Western world. Not only is there a new sheriff in town, but he ain't going anywhere ever.
You know, Madam Chu, as I said, who is my associate on China Now, often makes the point that he was raised under the CCP,
right,
and saw what happened, and lived what happened. But at any rate, he makes the point that the Chinese Communist Party is inhumane, but even more than being inhumane, it's anti-humane. It's anti-human. The aspirations of people mean nothing to the Chinese Communist Party. This is a party, a political party, that has literally killed somewhere between 45 and 65 million of its own people. They meant nothing, and they mean nothing today. So that is the tyranny that is being supported by guns and the mandate of heaven. Should the mandate of heaven change, it will present a great hope for the world. That's what I think.
It will present a grave what to the world?
A great hope.
A great hope
for the world.
Yeah, I understand.
And for the people of the world.
Well, we've still got just a few minutes before the top of the hour, and the question of questions here is, we've talked about the mandate of heaven, what it is, the conference of legitimacy in the minds of the Chinese people as to who is fit to rule. If the mandate of heaven shifts, as the Chinese people no longer trust or have any, in other words, the legitimacy of the Communist Party is gone, but the guns of the Chinese Communist Party are still there. In other words, what I'm asking is, can the Chinese Communist Party effectively veto and overcome the mandate of heaven? Can they simply negate it?
Well, I don't know. That's how I open this conversation with. We don't know yet. Can the guns overcome the mandate of heaven? We don't know. It's just something we have to wait and see. But even better than that, better than just waiting and seeing, we have to prepare. We have to gain strength. We have to build our military, we have to build our economy, and we have to, above all, we have to build our resolve to compete with China.
Well, that's for sure, because
China spent the last 30 years China has spent the last 30 years competing with us, with the U.S., which has been in total panda love with China. We have just been so smitten with panda love that we just let China take all of our money. We let China take control of all of our elite and of our institutions. We just really gave them America. Here, we love you so much.
That seems a bit of an exaggeration, but nevertheless, I do understand.
Why is that? Tell me why what am I exaggerating?
I do understand what you're talking about. But getting back to the other point, when Nansu, I think his words are very wise. Keep your powder dry. Be very aware, because in other countries, granted, the mandate of heaven concept is distinctly Chinese, but the idea of who has legitimacy in the eyes of the people versus who has actual power, this is a dichotomy you'll find in many places throughout the world. Not that long ago in Venezuela, we had an election that resulted in an overwhelming majority of anti-government deputies being elected to the National Assembly. They chose a new leader who was recognized as the legitimate head of state of Venezuela by many in the international community, including the United States of America. But I noticed that as I look at my newspaper, Maduro is still running the country and still eating all the babies he wants to eat. So it strikes me, when I look at models like that, I look at the Cuban model, I look at the North Korean model, it strikes me that if you're going to make a bet in China on the Communist Party or the mandate of heaven, you better bet on the Communist Party.
And that's what Nansu suggests we should build our strength and get ready to compete with them.
That could conceivably, and this is, we'll go out on this thought, this dichotomy between legitimacy in the eyes of hundreds of millions of Chinese and a willingness to impose tyranny from, this was the way some of the emperors used to try to rule, and this was why China for years was one of the world's most violent societies. If the lid ever comes off in China, there will be, well, let's say quite a party, is all I can say.
Amen. Amen.
Well, listen, thank you very much for calling and sharing your expertise and insights on this issue. Let's remind everybody once again of exactly when and where they could go to hear you and Nansu on China Now.
China Now, Thursday, 3 to 5, Santa Cruz Voice. You can find the archives at santacruzvoice.com. And thank you for hosting me, Charles.
Oh,
as always.
Thanks for your contribution. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, the YouTube videos of all the travail and difficulty in China, they are real. Just because you aren't reading about them in your newspaper, well, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you to. And that is a very important piece of information when you judge your media outlets. Thanks again, Michael. Pleasure. Have a great day.
All right. Zaijian, Hakojo.
It is 11 o'clock. I am going to cease my efforts for 6 minutes. We'll come back here and do one more hour. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you are too. 831-265-5050. Okay. What did we find here?
PG&E and California 211 Providers Network have teamed up to prepare you for a power outage. There are free resources available for people who...
It's no exaggeration to say that the modern civil rights movement began with the 1954 Supreme Court decision of Brown v. Board of Education. That the case reached the court was a testament to a nation's desire to correct a long-standing injustice, and at the same time an indictment for allowing the injustice to have existed for so long. Although the Union victory in the Civil War freed Black Americans from slavery, it did not free them from racism. Southern Democrats soon imposed Jim Crow laws to deny Black Americans the right to vote and to segregate them from whites. Even after large numbers of Black Americans served in both world wars, especially in World War II, social and material equality for white and Black citizens was far from a reality. For example, schools across the nation were, for the most part, segregated by race. These segregation policies had found their legal refuge in the infamous 1896 Supreme Court decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, which created the doctrine of separate but equal. That was the legal theory. It was rarely the practice. Black schools were almost always inferior. That was still true in the late 1940s and early 1950s, and it outraged many fair-minded people. One of those people was Thurgood Marshall, the founder of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. That Plessy had to be confronted, Marshall had no doubt. Whether the country was ready for such an assault was the issue. For several years, he waited for the right opportunity to present itself. It came in 1951, when Marshall found a group of Black parents from Topeka, Kansas, who were ready and willing to challenge their local school board's policy of racial segregation. At the heart of this action was Linda Brown, a young girl forced to attend a racially segregated school 24 blocks from her home, despite living near a whites-only school. Brown, Marshall argued before the court, was being deprived of her constitutional rights. He based his argument on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. That clause, ratified soon after the Civil War, declared that no state may deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Segregated schools, Marshall insisted, clearly violated that clause and were thus unconstitutional. The Supreme Court initially heard the case at the end of 1952. Had it reached a decision that year, it likely would have been a very close vote. That changed dramatically when President Dwight Eisenhower appointed Earl Warren, the Republican governor of California, as the new Chief Justice in 1953. Warren strongly favored abolishing segregation in public schools and was determined that the decision be unanimous. If it wasn't, he thought, segregationists could use the dissenting opinions as an excuse for delaying desegregation. Warren got his way. In May 1954, the court unanimously decided in favor of Brown. Writing for the court, Warren declared that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The era of Plessy was no more. The decision's historic significance was immediately apparent. Charles Johnson, the president of Fisk University, proclaimed, "If segregation is unconstitutional in educational institutions, it is no less so in other aspects of our national life." Brown mattered not only legally, but also morally and socially. It acknowledged the inherent dignity of all children and affirmed that quality education, the great equalizer, cannot be compromised. However, not everyone, including some in the Black community, believed the court had fully thought through the ramifications of its decision. Was immediate integration the most effective way forward? Would a more gradual approach be less socially disruptive? Would such an approach lessen the hostility that Black students would almost certainly encounter in predominantly white schools? The court rejected this incrementalist thinking. Racial integration could not be delayed. Resistance to the decision was fierce, especially in the South. Local and state officials declared they would openly oppose school integration. In September 1957, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus ordered Arkansas's National Guard to prevent 9 Black students, the Little Rock Nine, from entering the town's Central High School. A mob joined the Guard in blocking their entry. President Eisenhower responded by sending the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division to protect the students. Despite these challenges, the momentum Brown generated could not be stopped. As Charles Johnson anticipated, Brown's declaration of racial equality reverberated through the legal system. While Brown only dealt with segregation in public schools, courts applied it in case after case to desegregate other public settings, such as beaches, golf courses, and buses. All this laid the foundation for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We take for granted now that government-imposed segregation is a thing of the past, but we should not forget that Brown made it possible. I'm Sharif Girgis, Associate Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame for Prager University.
Okay, what do we got here? Whoa. Once more, an hour begins. It is 11:06 at Santa Cruz Voice. I'm Charles Friedman, welcoming you to our third hour. Thanks very much to Michael Olson for his contribution last hour. Definitely the guy to talk to when it comes to issues of Chinese politics and society. And, of course, once again, his program with Nan Su, China Now. That is Thursdays from 3 to 5 right here on Santa Cruz Voice. Okay, we have our first caller for the hour on the line right now, and without any further ado, I am going to welcome the Kansas experiment is the topic of the call. Let's find out what that's all about. Hello there, welcome.
Hey, Mr. Charles, it's Evan again. Hopefully we can get another caller in here pretty soon, 265, that 5050 there for that, your phone number. And great to hear Mr. Olson again calling in. Yeah, Kansas experiment. I'd like to kind of talk to you about the real live experiment in supply side tax policy. Massive income tax cuts, especially for high earners, pass-through businesses. Promised it would be a short underline into the heart of the Kansas economy. But instead, Growth Kansas got $900 million budget shortfall by 2017, school closures, teacher layoffs, shortened school years, cuts to infrastructure and Medicaid, credit downgrades, and fiscal instability. Economic growth and lagged behind neighborhood states. I just don't feel like some of the now, I'm not putting you down. I'm not even a math person myself, but I feel like some of these your supply side economics can be a bit, I guess, old. I don't want to put it down by any means, but I just don't feel like it works in a real life situation. For example, your caller called in and mentioned that that writer. Can you do you remember what the writer's name was, sir?
Let's get back to the bigger question that you raised. We're talking about there was a governor of Kansas by the name of Sam Brownback, and Governor Brownback was a very conservative Republican who wanted to see taxes reduced. The thing is that he was governor of Kansas. Now, Kansas was not a particularly high-tax state to begin with. There were opportunities there for tax reductions, which could have been undertaken on a gradualist basis. The idea we're going to begin lightening the burden on Kansas's citizens, and if this goes well, in a year or two, maybe we can have further reductions. Brownback didn't do that. Instead, he just said, okay, we're going to go the whole hog right away. Essentially, it was the Thomas Massie approach or the Elon Musk approach. And it, as you pointed out, caused tremendous travail in the Kansas budgetary process, and it resulted in the unthinkable happening. A Democrat got elected governor of Kansas in the aftermath of all of that. Now, if you had had the same type of, well, that type of using a machete approach, it only is reasonable or rational where you have something that's gone completely off the rails. There's a guy named Javier Milei who just got elected about a year and a half ago or so, president of Argentina. He campaigned waving a chainsaw around. Now, if you can imagine, going around running for president, and you're in parades and up on stages, and you're waving a chainsaw around. Run, run, run. This doesn't seem like, what are you trying to do? Scare the children? No, he was saying in Argentina, the state and everything are so tremendously overblown and bloated that you need to take a chainsaw to it. Since then, he has done so, and the results so far in Argentina are proving positive. The country is actually showing GDP growth. His ending of rent control, incidentally, in Buenos Aires resulted in hundreds and thousands of new units coming up for rent, with the result that rentals actually declined. And so, again and again, this process is shown to be only reasonable when you have egregious examples. The chainsaw is not for everybody. Mr. Brownback would have been well advised to understand that.
Granted, I hear you, and I probably don't want to debate with you for sure on that topic. Again, I'm not 100% on it, but I do feel that the rents are high, and I don't want to bother your callers again for this portion. But your caller did call in. One of your callers called in last hour. And I guess he talked about Thomas Sowell's classic economic critique of rent control.
Basic economics. The idea, I think it wasn't Sowell who made this up, but rent control is the best method for destroying an urban environment short of actual bombing. And again, there are examples that can be pointed to in places like New York City, where there are tremendously iniquitous results from rent control, people who actually pass apartments from father to son, people who will not move because, I can't move, I've got this tremendous rent-controlled apartment. In the meantime, the apartments themselves are deteriorating because landlords don't bother repairing them, or they do the bare minimum. Markets exist for a reason, Evan. They really do. Again, if you were shopping for an automobile, if you're a low-income person, you don't shop for an automobile, for a Packard or a Cadillac. You shop for a more affordable automobile. If you are looking for a place to live, like you don't live in Hillsborough or Carmel, and maybe you don't live in Santa Cruz. If it's
or even Scotts Valley, in which their median rent is about $4,000 a month too.
That's the problem.
I just don't get the whole economics thing where your rent's $4,000, but we're going and making how much at these places of work? It just doesn't make sense.
Then you should be. You seem to be upset because you say they're building these rabbit warrens in Santa Cruz. This is where if you're going to find a place with low rent, I don't like that term affordable. Everything's affordable for somebody. If you're going to find a low rent place in Santa Cruz, that's where you're going to be looking, because they're going to be building these multi-story things on. You can't build cheap housing on expensive land unless, of course, you build to several stories high. And then you're getting... Unless
you're my Democrat friend and he thinks Santa Cruz is going to be like Los Gatos, and we're going to have high rents like them over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you have an area that is attractive, that affluent people look at and say, hey, I like that, I want to live there, your rents and your prices are going to go up. They're going to be bid up by these affluent people. I guess there's another term for it. It's called gentrification. And it happens.
Well, anyway, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate your caller calling in too and giving me that Thomas Sowell. I'll probably go ahead and read into him a little bit more. Kind of interesting topic overall. I think it's hitting all of us here and around here in the town. And I'd hope to hear from your other callers for sure. 265-5050 for Charles Friedman. Appreciate it, there, sir. Have a great rest of the show.
Thank you for the call. Let's see here. We have our next caller already set to join us. This is Mark, and we always like to hear from him. So let's say hi. Mark, how are you doing?
Good, Charlie. You know, personal experience, I graduated from college in 1975, and I was going to Sacramento State in Sacramento, and it was very hot there. And I'd been to Monterey, and that was my dream, to move to Monterey. So I loaded up my van, and I stayed in the local state parks for a while. I looked for a job, which I found, and then I looked for housing. And I moved to Marina. I did not move to Monterey. And at that time, Fort Ord was active, and Marina was housing for the military and such. And found a place for, I think it was $250 a month. A house, actually. But I did not move to Monterey. I did not move to Carmel. I did not move to Pebble Beach. I moved to Marina and lived there several years. So, you know, you come here and look at Santa Cruz. Maybe you have to look at Modesto for a few years, get some money together, then come back. But that's just the way it turns. But I find, yeah, and the other thing, talking about rent control, okay, let's have homeowners insurance control. Let's have property tax control.
We
and then
have
maybe
that.
Things will come into line. Yeah, well, sort of. Sort of. If you buy a new house, you don't have property tax control.
Well, you get it as soon as you buy, and it takes effect from there. But, yeah, you make the point that a fresh transaction changes the base for property tax under Prop 13. But that's the way it was written, and that's the way it's always been. If you remain where you are, it's like the people in New York City who have rent-controlled apartments that they won't move out of. There are probably people in California who'd like to move from one place to another, but they don't, because if they do, they get their property tax jacked up.
Yeah, I could never sell my house. And, you know, the young family moved next door to me. Their property tax is double what mine is. And, you know, I've been in my home 34 years, so it's not cheap, but it's, you know, reasonable. But anyhow, anytime the government interacts in private enterprise, it's usually, or always, is a disaster. If we look at California, the government making our state greener, and Green New Deal. Well, you know, now our electricity is the highest in the country, our gasoline is the highest in the country, and on and on. So the government stepping in to control the environment has been a total failure. But one thing I find optimistic on this is what just happened in Louisiana. They had a House Bill 692 in Louisiana, and Governor Jeff Landry, Republican, just signed it. And what it is, it's treating energy, I'm trying to find the exact word here, it's going to codify into law affordable, reliable, and clean energy security. And how they're going to do this, and this is really important, it ensures equal treatment for all energy sources contributing to grid reliability and resiliency. So, yes, we're going to have wind. Yes, we're going to have solar. We're going to have batteries. But we're going to have petroleum-produced energy also. And it's all going to be traded equally as a contributor to the grid to make it reliable. And I thought, God, what a fantastic policy to follow. I wish they would state this here in California.
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath, at least until Republicans actually find a candidate for governor who is capable of mounting a serious campaign and unify behind him and make a serious campaign out of it. I'm heartbroken to see that there's absolutely no progress toward that happening. There are a group of non-entities running for the Republican nomination of governor of California. The only big gun we have here Kevin McCarthy is absolutely uninterested. You know, the one fella, I'll cruise this past you. Maybe you've heard of him. Rick Grinnell might possibly be able to raise a campaign as governor of California. He's a very bright guy. He has, I believe, fundraising capacity, which is something none of these other guys seem to have. Of course, the thing is that if you fragment the Republican vote 4 or 5 different ways between Zaki and Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton and Rick Grinnell, then you wind up with a situation where in the November election you're going to have 2 Democrats.
No, that's very true. And unfortunately, I've heard Rick Grinnell's name. I can't, point him out directly, but I hope someone comes through. And I wish we could draft Governor Landry and bring him over here from Louisiana. And, he made the statement that Louisianians will no longer be pawns of the new Green Deal scam supported by, quote, experts whose main goals are more political than science-based. And, we've seen that. They're looking for what kind of water heater you can put in your house. I mean, they want ultimate control. And they're using the Green New Deal to bring this about.
Well, as I've mentioned many times, there's nothing liberal about the modern left. It is authoritarian by nature. They know what's right, and they're eager to use state power to coerce your conformity. That's about as
we saw that during COVID.
Plainly as I can put it.
COVID.
It's just these are control freaks, and they want to control you and me and everybody else. On this energy issue that you've raised, there's a piece in today's Wall Street Journal by Andy Kessler in which he actually credits Al Gore for helping the United States over the past 20 years or so surpass Europe. If you think that we've damaged our economy and our energy grid with green mandates, look at what Europe has done. They have gone much.
Oh yeah, we see them.
They have gone much further down this same road. Right now, they just had massive outages in Spain because Spain uses something 56% of its electricity comes from solar and wind, and these are, these gyrate all the time and knock out the power system. Now, we have in the United States of America as a whole only 21%. That's a much smaller number. Is renewables. Now here in California, it's probably more than that. But I don't know. There may be help on the way. I just read a story in today's Chronicle that they're opening up additional oil drilling here in California, which is something we've needed for a long time.
Oh yeah, it's crazy that we're an oil importer and we're probably the 4th largest oil reserve on Earth. But that's how it is. Hey, last week you brought up California schools, and you brought up phonics.
Yeah.
And I was involved with PVUSD, and when phonics was eliminated, and they brought in a teaching method called whole language. And instead of using phonics to sound out the word, you utilize a word in a sentence, and off you go. And the reason they got rid of phonics is they said it was discriminatory against English learning students, the ELS program, that they couldn't grasp the phonics system because of their basic language background, which I never really understood. I mean, it worked for 200 years in this country. When you move here from the Netherlands, you'd go, local school, and you'd be learning phonics. But it was called whole language, and total disaster. But what they're trying to do this last year and this year, there's been 2 bills to bring phonics back, and they both failed. And the teachers union lobbied hard against it. But it's funny, what they're not calling it phonics, they're calling it science of reading. So we're going to have science of reading, and it's phonics. But right now the teachers union is holding it up. And again, they're quoting discrimination against English learning students.
I'm confused. I thought that a number of years ago they had already thrown out opposing things, and that phonics was back in California schools. You're telling me no, they still haven't done that?
No, it's not bad.
Oh, for Christ's sakes.
No. that's why our reading scores are, we got 17% of the local students reading at grade level.
Well,
But,
that would explain it.
phonics is not bad.
That would definitely explain it, because other methods simply are ineffective compared with phonics. That's what works.
Yeah. No, you can go through, this local newspaper, backgrounds and look at the last 2 years on the fight to bring phonics back to California schools, and it's listed under the science of learning, but it's phonics, and the teachers union said no.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah. Yep. Okay, Charles. Well, anyhow, I'm very impressed with Louisiana. I want to see how this goes. They're taking a science approach to this. Let's utilize our resources to bring resiliency to our energy grid, and that's wind, solar, batteries, and petroleum. And we'll roll from there.
Thank you for the call.
Oh, and nuclear.
Always
bring
good.
Nuclear, too.
Always good to hear from you. Take it easy, Mark.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay, we've had been a very active telephone today. I can't tell you how grateful I am to the people who called. Always makes the program better, and I learn something. Learn something every day from the people who call in. Makes it a pleasure. We're not done yet. Time is 11:27, so I'm going to do my bottom of the hour ad package. If you have something that you'd like to add to what we've been going on here, or something entirely different, 831-265-5050. Call during this ad break, and we'll be talking with you in just 2 minutes.
The Hook is California's first ever cannabis outlet. 100% locally owned and operated, we're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. We believe that everyone should have access to fairly priced cannabis, so we work hard to get it to you for 30 to 50% less than the other guys. If you're 21 or older with a valid ID, visit us in Capitola or in Watsonville today. We're here to be your friendly neighborhood hookup. Check out our website, hookoutlet.com, for deals, and stay groovy.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. 25 years ago, my husband Rudy and I opened Charlie Hong Kong with the commitment to serve healthy food grown in healthy soil. Today, the healthy food we serve comes from the sacred land in Pajaro Valley, where Dick Peugeot and his Lakeside Organics grow the soil, and the soil grows the healthy plant that we serve to you. When you eat at Charlie Hong Kong, you eat healthy food, and it's delicious. Charlie Hong Kong, Santa Cruz.
Tomatoes, carrots, radishes, onions, squash, watermelon, all things we must eat regularly to survive. Hi, folks, Warren Knox here. Wouldn't it be great to just walk out your front or back door and right there you can pick pesticide and chemical-free food that you grew? You can do just that with a Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, elevated garden box that will allow you to grow just about any vegetable or flower there is. Sold assembled or unassembled, shipped worldwide. The therapy of gardening is just a call away. You can find your Knox Garden Box built in Scotts Valley, California, or log on to www.knoxgardenbox.com. Our staff will answer any questions on gardening, so if you don't have a green thumb, believe we can see that you do. Okay, phone number to call is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Okay, we have, let's see here, 11:29, 30 minutes left in today's program, and I would only be too happy to spend some of them with you. We've had an active phone today. Let's keep it that way, 831-265-5050. Your call on whatever topic you care to raise is welcome. Okay, I've got a couple of things here that I'd like to kind of shine a light on. One of them is, well, Mr. Trump has been shining a light on this himself. Over the weekend, he has been touting a pronouncement he intends to make on Ukraine policy. So here we have the president saying, stay tuned to this station for a big announcement. So this big announcement is supposed to happen sometime today. It's 11:30 here now, so that means it's 2 or 3:30 back east. So the question is, has Mr. Trump already made this big announcement? Now, I've got to admit, when I'm doing my programming here, I'm kind of isolated. And frankly, I do not know if Mr. Trump has made any additional pronouncement on Ukraine or not. I wonder what it might be. I mean, for the past 3 months, 4 months, pretty much since Mr. Trump retook the reins back in January, he has been continually attempting, through, I would call it a process of cajolery. There are those who want to hawk the idea that, well, he's sympathetic to Putin, he's in Putin's pocket. That has never seemed likely. What rather seems more likely is that Mr. Trump, being the very personal type negotiator he is, has sized up Vladimir Putin. After all, they have met a number of times. He sized up Vladimir Putin as the kind of guy who, if you want to move him in your direction, you don't do it by, bludgeoning him. You do it rather instead by come-ons, by flattery, by cajolery, even by some what should I say? At least reasonably favorable actions. None of this has worked. President Trump has made it clear time and time again, publicly, and I'm sure to Mr. Putin, that what he is interested in is an end to the killing. Mr. Trump is a peacenik. Like so many others of my generation, he is a peacenik. He wants peace. But fortunately, unlike some of my generation, he understands that that peace is valuable, and in order to obtain something valuable, occasionally you have to do some fighting. In other words, you have to fight for peace. That sounds like an oxymoron, but it really isn't. When you get to think about it, anything that has value, anything that's worthwhile, well, from time to time you might have to fight for it. Now, Mr. Putin has made it abundantly clear, and over a period of time, consistently, he has even been, I guess, insulting, disrespectful to the president. The term we've heard is he's shining him on. And Mr. Trump has, over the past couple of weeks, made it clearer and clearer that he is fed up with this. We've heard some language from the president, who doesn't often use profane terms, but occasionally when he does, we know that something is really on his mind. When he says that Putin has been offering a lot of BS, and he did not use the initials, that was a cue. That was a clue that the president is running out of patience with Vladimir Putin. Now, of course, there are elements in his MAGA coalition who don't care about any of this. They quite literally really are the peace weenies from the 60s generation. Nothing in the world justifies violence. If somebody is going to get violent, you simply stand back and let them do it. You don't oppose them. Because, oh my God, somebody could get hurt. Well, I'll tell you what. That is a recipe for enabling tyrants. It is not and has not been the American way. Oh, there have been people who've argued for that. Jeanette Rankin voted against going into World War II the day after Pearl Harbor. Nobody attacked her for that or hurt her or anything. Next time she ran for re-election, she was soundly defeated. That's the way we take down poor ideas in this country. We defeat them, and we retire them from the public square. So Mr. Trump has a section of his political coalition that is dead set against any sort of defense of freedom. The last time they were vocal was leading up to the bombing of Iran, which has been generally regarded, even Mr. Trump's Democratic opponents don't dare speak out too strongly against it because they know that in doing so they look foolish. That the operation was successful, that it did not get us involved in some prolonged conflict. Rather, instead, it served its purpose and was executed flawlessly. For that reason, they're being less vocal about Mr. Trump's current moving in the direction of doing more in Ukraine. Now, what will this manifest itself as? For the 87th time, no American is fighting in Ukraine, and no American will be fighting in Ukraine. So those people are saying, oh, well, the next thing you know, we're going to be sending our boys over there to fight. No, we're not. No, we're not. That's not part of what's being talked about here. Well, what else might we do? Well, we have been providing war material, weapons, and ammunition to the Ukrainians, giving them the means to defend themselves against Russian aggression. Mr. Trump has just indicated that this will continue. There was a recent pause, indeed, in that flow, and it appears that that was not Mr. Trump's idea. That whoever ordered that, for whatever reason, did so without the president's knowledge or approval. Keep your eye on that. If you see Pete Hegseth depart as Secretary of Defense anytime in the near future, you can figure that that's why. He may be able to work his way back into Mr. Trump's good graces, but that was an error on Hegseth's part. If he acknowledges it and moves on, then possibly amends can be made. At any rate, the continued provision of war material to the fighting men of Ukraine is one thing. Another thing is an increased sanction regime. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has been pushing in the Senate for some time now a sanctions package that essentially takes aim at Russia's ability to fund its war machine. Russia's economy is not doing well right now at all. They have, just like in the Soviet days, they put so much of their capacity, their economic capacity, into this war that they're starving and shrinking the rest of their economy. The question, of course, how long can they continue to do this? And that gets back to what we were talking about in hour number 2. A tyranny can remain in power as long as it is willing to be sufficiently brutal. When we're talking about brutality, there's one thing I'd like you to remember here. We hear Americans, on the left all the time, shrieking and wailing about how awful Donald Trump is. Donald Trump has never tortured or killed a human being. Never in his life. Vladimir Putin did that for a living. That was his career. That was what he did as an officer of the KGB. So when you're talking about, I want to say levels of willingness to engage in coercive behavior, Putin is off the charts. Putin is off the charts. A KGB veteran, real, live, honest-to-God, bona fide. So how do you get control of a guy like this? Well, Senator Graham's idea is it's a tariff bill. I'm sure that Mr. Trump would be attracted by that. Essentially, the idea is the United States of America imposes 500% tariffs. It just insane, utterly shuts off trade with any nation found to be purchasing Russian oil or gas. They've been funding their war machine by selling these fuels, primarily to the Chinese and to the Indians. If we suddenly say to those governments, okay, you want to buy Russian oil, go ahead, but your trade with the United States of America is utterly ended. A 500% tariff is not collected. It is designed to cut off trade, and it would. So at that point, your governments in China, India, or any other country for that matter have a choice. They can decide, well, do we want to continue to buy oil and gas from the Russians, or do we want to continue to have a huge trade relationship encompassing all sorts of things, and for many more billions or even trillions of dollars, do we want to continue having that relationship with America? For that reason, this measure would be very successful and very effective. It has something like 82 or 83 co-sponsors in the Senate. So if it is introduced there, it will sail through. I saw House Speaker Mike Johnson talking about it over the weekend. He sounded very friendly to it himself, and he also made the point that in his body as well, there would be bipartisan support for this measure. Mr. Trump would then have the opportunity to sign it, and the measure itself is flexible. It allows the president to either implement it or not to implement it as he sees fit. So, you know, the carrot, the stick. It seems like Mr. Trump right now is in the mood to apply a bit more of a stick. Let's find out what Greg has to say about this. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Charles. I definitely think a stick is appropriate. Sending the weapons to NATO and replenishing Patriots and then distributing to Ukraine is kind of the plan there, and other weapons that possibly could reach Moscow. I think I don't want to see war escalate, but Trump is not stupid. He knows he's being played at this point. And, you know, he said he's going to apply 100% tariff in 50 days. And he's entertaining the bill from Lindsey that's 500%. But he said, you know, 100%, 500%, 100% is effective enough, you know. 500% crazy. But I think, you know, having more defense weaponry like the Patriot for Ukraine, since Putin likes to kill civilians, and giving them a longer range missile to maybe get the people of Russia in the streets, that would be a good thing. Because, like you said, he's a thug. He doesn't care about human life. He doesn't care about the bloodshed. He just cares about his end result, his power, thirst, and glut that he has. And that's what he cares about. He wants his land. He wants his power.
Well, that's the way I see it, certainly. And this idea that he came up with, a week or two ago, wherever a Russian soldier sets his boot, that's Russia. I mean, this is not the kind of language you hear out of a rational person. This is the kind of language you hear out of a warlord.
Yeah, and he's primitive. That's a primitive way of thinking on this earth now. It's really primitive. So that's how I feel about him. The sooner he dies, the better. I hate to say that, but he's bad for Russia. It could be a beautiful country, that, you know, with rich culture and a lot of other nice things. But instead you have a dictator that wants to take over a good portion of the world. So I personally can't stand him now. I no chance for me to ever have trust for Putin in the world stage. He's
So
a thug.
the way you couch that leads me to think that you have your thinking has evolved on Mr. Putin. Is this the case?
My thinking has evolved. I've always thought he was a thug. I thought that maybe that he would step into the world stage and take some responsibility, but he's not. So he's just a thug, a power-thirsty thug. And Russia's not going to be good until he's gone.
Well, here's a guy who made his living torturing and killing human beings. So don't be too surprised.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about is Karen Bass and her harboring migrants. What she's doing is she's getting philanthropic money to, she's kind of brokering money, not taxpayer money, but donations on the higher level to different organizations, which then distribute cards to illegal migrants to harbor them, and so they can, lay low while ICE blows over. To me, that's aiding and abetting a criminal indirectly, maybe not using taxpayer money, but her energy and the time that she's using, which is taxpayer paid, her energy and time, is being used in a contradictory way to the federal law. So I think he should be arrested. I'm not like a Gestapo person, but you got to make an example of this. I mean, what's happening in our state, the way the officers are being treated, I saw a video, it's horrific. Somebody can get killed. So they need to really go after these people that are inciting this to or encouraging it.
Well, I certainly go along with that. The idea that public officials, elected officials, would place themselves in the position of aiding and abetting lawless people, lawless conduct, it's unimaginable, and yet it's our everyday reality now. This is one of the reasons why I'll be quite honest. I do fear for the future of the republic, because we're at a time when, what if Karen Bass or somebody like her, somebody who thinks that way, were president right now? What if we had elected Kamala Harris? 4 years of her, and we wouldn't have a country anymore. At least I don't think so.
Oh, absolutely. We would not have a country. Just on the border of what's come through and what's happening, there's a lot more malicious phone calls being done that I see, more attacks through email. Like I said, in my business, the insurance industry has been hacked so much that it's really affected all of our businesses and the way we have to practice for reimbursement and assign benefits.
Uh-huh.
Having to bill by mail and by email, because email it's just not happening electronically. You have to go snail mail now. That's new because of cyber attacks. So I just think that the way things are being run, and if we had more illegal immigration into the country, I mean, they're bad actors. Not all of them are bad. Some people just want to get the hell out of their country and see the opportunity of America. But you can't have that. You have to have order. You have to vet the people. And you just can't open your border like they did. So 4 more years of that, I agree, our country would be completely destroyed. It wouldn't be America anymore, the way we grew up.
Right.
And that's why I'm so into what Mr. Trump is doing, because he sees it and he wants to reset it. And but he's getting so much opposition internally. You would think that Americans would say, I don't want these people in my country. They came here illegally. Geez, my grandparents came here legally. They went through Ellis Island or came through and served in the war and did all their things to get their kudos for the country. But not bust in and start raping children and killing citizens and robbing and doing cyber things and espionage, which is all part of what's come up from this. 4 more years, no way. If Trump hadn't been elected, I think it would have been a disaster with Kamala.
But the thing is that now every presidential election is going to carry on that same kind of existential quality. The next time the Democrats nominate somebody, it won't be Ms. Harris because she's so ineffective and just really a very poor candidate. No, it'll be somebody who has the same ideas but is a lot sharper at being a salesperson. It'll be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She may very well be the next nominee for president of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and scary thought. Scary thought, but I don't think she could win right now. I don't think she could win. She could be the nominee, but I don't think she could win the presidency.
Kamala Harris got
ultimately.
48%. 48% of the popular vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's too much.
It's too much, but, like I said, she had the legacy media protecting her and propping her and doing all kinds of things. And
well, that's going to be the case, Greg. No matter if the Democrats run Nethigabalaba, that's still going to be the case. That megaphone belongs to them.
I said it has to stop.
Not
Reform
gonna.
needs to be done there.
Not gonna.
Reform.
The only way it stops is if the American people turns away from them in such a way that their
they are.
Their economic model
Look at
collapses.
their ratings. Look at their numbers.
Yep, they're
Look at
still
their viewership.
They're still on the air and making money.
Yep, they sure are, but their viewership is way down.
That's true, but there
way
are
down.
still people willing to. Perhaps they're buying advertising not because they think it's going to be an effective way to sell their products, but because they simply want to show support for this leftism, and so
they want to continue the propaganda in their direction.
Yeah,
that's right. I agree with you there. I see that.
Makes sense to me.
I see that being, yeah. It's like almost like a donation to keep the company spewing out their lies and their twists and spins. Because that's what a lot of it is, completely. So, I think Karen Bass, going back to her,
yeah,
I really think they should do something about this. Because it gives a poor message to other cities that, this is what we do. We use private sector to transfer money to aid and abet criminals in our country. She's not even considering, as she says, her Angelonians. Whenever she speaks, it looks like a staged group of people. There's always one priest, one cop, every color of the rainbow race, somebody with a turban, behind her. It looks so staged, like she can't even get the support that she really needs. So I think they need to do something with her on the federal side and be more restrictive of allowing people to hurl rocks at ICE agents and all this other stuff, shoot at them. They need to go after these people immediately, put them in jail, charge them, but it doesn't continue.
Well, of
It's
course,
very concerning to me.
Anybody who actually participates in those actions, they're interfering with law enforcement, they're assaulting officers, etc. Yes, absolutely. And I saw an official being interviewed yesterday, and he said, "Yeah, we're rounding these people up. They're not getting away with this. We're arresting them, and they're going to be prosecuted." But now you're calling for.
I sure hope so.
You're saying, or you seem to be saying, well, let's prosecute Karen Bass. Bear in mind, Karen Bass desperately wants to be arrested. The reason she's conducting
You really think so?
Oh, absolutely. In her view, this would be the best political stunt that she had pulled since getting elected. So this is something that she is... And the simple fact that she is so desperate for it makes me say, no, don't give her what she wants. Instead, enforce the law in her city and make her sit through it. Oh, incidentally, there's a story here that I thought you might find interesting. It's about Los Angeles. Evidently, when she came in, of course, she cut back the police department, and they lost officers. Officers resigned and went to other venues. Officers retired, etc. Now they find that they're having to call in a tremendous number of their existing officers to perform overtime, which, of course, is overtime pay, time and a half or even double time in certain circumstances. So they're actually paying more money, more out of the city treasury for this, and as a result of Mayor Bass's irresponsible and irrational attitudes toward police.
Yeah, well, she's incompetent to me. How did it go when they arrested when the congressperson, I can't even remember her name, barged in and assaulted the ICE officer? How did it go for her? Did that publicity stunt help her or hurt her? You know what I'm talking about? When she barged in, she went to trial, I believe, or she's in litigation right now for it.
Are you talking
How'd
about...
that work out for?
Okay, there have been several of these. Are you talking about there was a judge, a municipal Superior Court judge in Wisconsin, who...
That was one of them, and a congressperson, too.
This, a member of the House of Representatives. Right, in New Jersey.
Right. And one of our Congress people barged in on Kristi Noem. How did that go for him? Did that prop him up, or... I don't see anything about him like it propped him up. I think it shut him up a little bit.
I saw, he actually got taken out, and they manhandled him a bit. The thing is that they had no idea.
Well, he was manhandling them.
Yeah, he had no idea who they had no idea who he was. He said, "I'm a U.S. senator." Hey, anybody can claim that. If you're a U.S. senator, behave like one.
Right. Dress like one, too. Wear your pin, show identification, and don't barge in on a press conference. Part of its behavior. But Karen Bass, you say she wants to be arrested. I don't know about that. As that could be an unpleasant thing.
Yeah, we could be wrong. I could be wrong, but we'll keep an eye on her. The way she's conducting herself makes me think she's going, come on, please. Listen, got to say goodbye. We're out of time.
Her defiant?
Got to say goodbye. We're out of time. Thank you very much for the call. Been a delightful conversation as always, Greg.
Take care, Charles.
I will do that. You do the same. Okay,
Bye-bye.
It is time to say goodbye. Thank you very much to all the great people who called in today. See you tomorrow at 9:06. Okay. 162. 162.